So hello and welcome to this video. Today I am talking about the amazing, the wonderful and the fabulous Josephine Baker. So this is my portrait of Josephine for the YOUNIVERSE calendar, which features 12 amazing women, one for every month of next year, 2024. So I've chosen each woman for specific reasons, and Josephine Baker I find to be a really inspiring woman because of her really amazing story from growing up in poverty in the US, in a very racist society, and arriving in Paris and becoming basically an international star as a dancer, singer. And then from there going on to found her own restaurants, being instrumental in the French victory in World War II as a spy for the French, participating in the American Civil Rights Movement next to Martin Luther King, and then finally growing her own global family, as she called it, her family of 12 adopted children that she brought up in her chateau, Milan, just not far from Paris. So very, very amazing woman. This is her in her very famous banana skirt outfit, which was the outfit that she wore for one of her first hit shows, a show in the Folies Bergère Theatre in Paris, which was her own show that she staged at the very young age of 21 years old. So one of her, just to rewind to her beginnings, she was born in 1906 in Mississippi in southern US, in St. Louis. And one of her earliest memories is actually of the St. Louis race riots, where she witnessed the burning down of Negro homes in these race riots by the white people of St. Louis. So to quote her, she says, "I remember the horror of the East St. Louis race riot. I can still see myself standing on the west bank of the Mississippi, looking over the glow of the burning of Negro homes, lighting the sky. We children stood huddled together in bewilderment, unable to understand the horrible madness of mob violence." So that was a quote taken actually from a speech that she gave in St. Louis much later in 1952. So she was actually a granddaughter of ex-slaves. So her grandparents were freed slaves. So she's has a very, very direct connection to the history of oppression of Black people via the slave trade in the US. So her mother, Carrie MacDonald, was a poor woman and struggled to bring her up to the point that when Josephine Baker was just 8 years old, her mother sent her out to work as a domestic servant in the home of white people. In this home, she was abused, she was treated badly, and she was given a box in the cellar to sleep in. By the time she was 13, she was already earning her own living by dancing on the streets of St. Louis. And this was the age where she actually married for the first time. At the same time as dancing on the streets, she was working in a restaurant as a waitress, and one of the clients, who was a 52-year-old man, I think, proposed marriage to her, and she got married to him. Luckily, her mother came and rescued her from that relationship, got her out of that marriage. But just 2 years later, at the age of 15, she married another man, William Baker, who was a musician. This marriage also didn't last very long, just for 2 years, but the name Baker that she took on from her husband did actually stick. So at 16 years old, despite, or maybe partly because of this really harsh and poor upbringing where she wasn't even able to go to school, she decided to try her luck on the stage in New York, and she traveled from the southern states, Mississippi, to New York, and managed to get her way into a chorus line as a dancer in Broadway. Just a few years later, after this, she was discovered in her Broadway show by the American ambassador to Paris, who invited her to take part in a show in Paris. This show was the Revue Negre, which was one of these kind of performances where African people were brought onto the stage to dance, to sing, to perform in front of white audiences, and it was like some kind of very colonial view of the African people, seeing them as some kind of noble savages. So Josephine Baker did not really appreciate this part of the performance, but she loved the opportunity to be on stage in Paris dancing at the Théâtre des Champs-Élysées. So that was in 1925, when she was just 19 years old. And just 2 years later, after this very first performance in the Revue Negre, she had her own show in the Folies Bergère dance hall. And this was the occasion where she was first seen in her famous banana skirt, which is what I have drawn here in her portrait. So this was apparently a suggestion of one of her directors, choreographers, the banana skirt, also along the same lines as the kind of noble savage coming to dance for the civilized people straight from the jungle in a banana skirt. So apparently she really was not so into that, but she took it on board, and she kind of made a joke about it in her own way. She sort of took it as a comedy piece for her to kind of riff off. So by this time, so when she's just 21 years old, she's already become very famous in Paris, and she starts to do tours of Europe. Then 5 years later, she returns to the US, hoping to have a kind of a triumphant entry and a successful stage show there on her tour. But she was not so well received in the States, because that country was still mired in racism, still mired in race fights and race wars. And so she struggled to she wasn't even served in a New York hotel that she entered into. She was refused service for being a black woman. At that hotel, Grace Kelly actually came to her rescue and really defended her, fighting with the hotel on her behalf in order for her to get served a cup of coffee. So Time magazine at that time reviewed her show and really mocked her in a way, and I quote, "A slightly buck-toothed Negro woman whose figure might be matched at any nightclub. show, and whose dancing and singing might be topped almost anywhere but Paris. So quite a demeaning, dismissive review of her show. So after that experience, she returned to France and she decided to settle permanently. She became a French citizen, and she really started to feel at home in Paris. In Paris, she felt that she had been immediately loved, embraced, accepted by the French people in a way that she was not in America, just by reason of being a Black woman. So she became very famous in Paris, and she developed some eccentric habits, such as keeping her pet cheetah called Chiquita, keeping a pet cheetah in her apartment in Paris, who actually traveled with her and also was part of her performances, apparently terrorizing the orchestra pits, running down from the stage, the cheetah, down into the orchestra pit during her shows. During this time, she actually opened her own restaurant called Chez Josephine in Paris. And at this restaurant, she kept some more pets. She had a pig called Albert, and she also had a goat called Tutut, who lived in her dressing room while the pig lived in the kitchen. So by the time the Second World War rolled around in Paris in 1939, when Paris was invaded by Nazi Germany, became occupied by Nazi Germany, she, feeling really proud to be a French woman, as she had become a French woman, she had citizenship of France, she decided to become a spy for France to help in the war effort in whatever way that she could. After this, she actually moved to Morocco. She set up a base in the North African territories, and she gathered intelligence for France from this base. Apparently, she sewed different notes into her underwear and also hid photographs in her dresses as she was touring around doing her shows. Ernest Hemingway, the American novelist, writer who was based in Paris for some time around the same time as Josephine Baker, called her the most sensational woman anyone ever saw. She supposedly received 1,500 marriage proposals in her lifetime, and over her lifetime, after those two early marriages at 13 and 15, she was married 3 more times. So when she was a spy for France in World War II, she was based in Morocco collecting top secret information from the North African front of the war. And during this time, she actually also suffered a miscarriage. So she suffered a really difficult miscarriage and then actually had to have a hysterectomy. So as a result of the hysterectomy, she was not able to have any children after that. And so her and her husband, Joe Bouillon, started after the war to adopt children. She ended up adopting 12 children from all different parts of the world and bringing them to live in her chateau. She bought a chateau called Chateau Milande, and she brought her children, her 12 children, to live with her and her husband in this chateau not far from Paris. And she called her family a global family. And it was her desire to bring up these children who were from different races, Asian, African, Caucasian, also from Latin America, to bring them up to live in peace and harmony together as an example to the world of how to live harmoniously with different races. So after the war, she was actually received 3 honors from France. She received the Legion of Honor, the Croix de Guerre, and she also received the Rosette de la Résistance. So she was such an active member in the French resistance, resisting the Nazi occupation. And she received an award also from the resistance movement. So she also was quite instrumental in supporting the cause of the American Civil Rights Movement, so the movement for equal rights for Black and white Americans, which was promoted by Martin Luther King. And in 1963, she traveled to America in order to appear at the rally, a huge rally in Washington, organized by Martin Luther King. And she was the second person to give a speech, so second in line on the billing there to give a speech to all the assembled people about civil rights, and about referring in her speeches also to her own experiences as a Black woman in France, where she had been received in a really loving and open way, very different to the experience that she had growing up as a young Black woman in the US. In France, she had been received with open arms and did not receive anything like the racist treatment that she received in America most of her life. So when Martin Luther King actually died, was assassinated, his wife Carol approached Josephine Baker and asked if she would be interested in taking over the leadership of that movement, filling the space that Martin Luther King left vacant. She declined that offer because she felt that it would bring her away too much from her 12 adopted children that she was bringing up together with her husband in the Chateau Milande. So in the last year of her life, in 1975, she gave her last concert. She was 68 years old, and she gave a huge show. She offered a huge concert in Paris, which was a massive success and was attended by many celebrities such as Grace Kelly, Diana Ross, Mick Jagger, and other really super famous people. So that is a little bit about the life of this amazing woman, Josephine Baker, born in the US in 1906, moved to France in 1925 and became a global dancehall musical star. So I'm very excited that my universe calendar has actually arrived today, just today, fresh, hot off the presses, and it is now ready for you to purchase. And this is the page here with Josephine Baker. So if you would like to get one of these awesome universe calendars for yourself to accompany you throughout all of the months of 2024 with the wisdom and the heart and the spirit of these 12 awesome women, that would make me so happy, and it will give you instantly red fingernails just like that overnight. Maybe not guaranteed. So lots of love from me here in Vienna. I will talk to you very soon.